Welcome to Cyber Focus from the McCrary Institute, where we explore the people and ideas shaping and defending our digital world. I'm your host, Frank Salufo, and today we're on location at RSA, and I have the privilege to sit down with two amazing and powerful women in the cyber business. First and foremost, Alison King, who's a vice president for government affairs at Forescout, and Elisa Costante, who is vice president for research and runs Verderi Labs at Forescout. Thrilled to have you guys today. Thanks for joining us. Alison, we'll start with you because I didn't mention you're a senior fellow and you are a senior fellow of ours. And I thought we could start with a little bit of a discussion around where we stand on the critical infrastructure sets of issues. You and I had a piece I doubt we'll disagree much about since we co-authored it. National Security Memorandum 22, but let me turn it over to you.
Sure. Yeah, so it's been a busy week in the policy domain. This week at RSA, for everybody who's tracking, the Department of State released their much anticipated international cyber strategy. And then, of course, the Office of the National Cyber Director also released their posture review, which we'll look to dig into at another time. But the NSM 22 was the one that everybody was waiting for.
With the bated breath for a long time.
And for all those that celebrate, it finally arrived. Yes, it came. And so to kind of jump on your point on the age of the document, so it was promulgated during a simpler time, during the Obama administration, 2013, and it established the 16 sectors for critical infrastructure. And over the course of time, we've seen with the pandemic, and then just the rise of conflict between, strategic competition, I would say, between the United States, Russia, China, and some other actors who've entered the chat, as they say. The threat landscape has just intensified. And so that document, which looks to govern emerging tech policy, really needed to be refreshed. So I was delighted to see that the Biden administration took that on. It was a little later than what we would have liked, but it's something that was absolutely necessary. And from where I'm sitting, the most important modernization effort that took place was codifying CISA as a national coordinator.
Which didn't even exist when PDD 21 was promulgated during the Obama administration. Before we jump to some of the broader OT issues and some of the unique research that Forescout has done, what net, I think, moved the needle in a good direction, but there were a couple things lacking.
Yes, I would agree. So there is still more work to be done, and specifically around the critical infrastructure sectors. We've seen that, unfortunately, space systems and cloud was not included in there, and we know that those are strategic interest areas for us and our adversaries, and they are not uncontested. And so I hope that this is a bipartisan area as well, and that whether it's the executive branch or it's the legislative branch, that they do take a harder look at what we need to do to shore up our resilience in those two areas.
I'm going to try not to jump too deep because you get me on space, I'll never stop. But I obviously share that view in terms of designating space. Anything else before we
I also appreciated, too, that there was recognition that the intelligence community plays an important role in this. And so those threat assessments and really highlighting the need to collaborate to ensure that we have the full OV, which cannot be produced without intense and collaborative operational work between the government and the private sector, is an area that I think that was articulated by the administration, and I'm just delighted to see it.
Alison, thank you. Elisa, so you guys came out with a pretty powerful report, and I'm someone who I think I'm a little more informed than the average person on some of these issues, and you identified, I think it was a 40% growth in a number of technologies that FCC has put on their equipment bans in the United States. Can you shed a little bit of light on this report? And I got to tell you, it took me aback. I was surprised to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very that is powerful. Someone like you with your knowledge, boots on the ground day to day, finds that interesting. That's like point that we bring home. Actually, it was interesting because, like as Alison has been saying, we are reading all about this news, what's going on about, not so friendly governments that maybe are attacking constantly, right? Like the other day, there was this joint FBI, CISA, and other bodies that mentioned about Russian activists being in our water utilities or attacking them. So there is like a lot going on. And we had this research question, which was, what about there is this been banned list? How many of those devices in the banned list after 2 years we actually see? We have this very powerful data lake at ForceCat where actually we get metadata from all our installation base to understand how the demographics of devices that are there looks like. So we had this question. It's like, okay, let's compute a list of Chinese manufactured Mac UII, and let's see how many of those do we see in federal government, specifically in the US or in other countries as well. So we did this and we looked and we were really surprised by the data.
So you were surprised too. Good. So I'm not the only.
I was really
Especially
surprised.
the spike.
It's a big spike, and you will expect it to stabilize. But actually, if you think and if you pair this with other trends, which is increasing of IoT, and guess where IoT is manufactured? Difficulties in procurement. SBOM, software bill of material, is a big thing, but it's not deployed. Whenever you buy a box, it's still a black box.
Exactly.
If we think about white labeling, right? Maybe it doesn't say Hikvision anymore, but inside, it is still an Hikvision software components and camera.
I used to joke Intel inside, the old Intel commercial. You have Intel inside with some of these black boxes.
Yeah, and
right?
it's difficult. It's difficult when you're doing procurements to even understand. So what the message indeed was in the report that it is not easy to implement such kind of regulatory or adhere with this banned list.
So if I'm not mistaken, year over year, you saw a 40% increase in technology such as Hikvision, Huawei, ZTE. Am I right?
Yeah. But the list actually was longer. I think in total we had something like 400 manufacturers, but IP cameras were definitely NVR.
High on the list.
Yes, network video recorders were the highest on the list.
So now that gets to a question I want to bring you both into this, and that's the significance of OT and IoT and IIoT and Internet of Everything, whatever we want to call it.
I love them unmanaged devices because that's what they share, all of them, right? You cannot manage. There is unagendable, unmanaged, and then it's the bigger family.
Exactly. And I have a hard time seeing any OT device that doesn't have an IT component and vice versa.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me about sort of OT. And Alison, I know you and I have had discussions, and I want to make sure we bring up.
Yeah, of course. And so we have seen, unfortunately, over the last few years, especially if you look at 2018, that's when Cyber Command was vocal about these hunt forward teams that they were sending overseas to be able to encounter adversaries that were intended on targeting the United States. And so...
And General Nakasone deserves a lot of points for leaning forward in this.
Amount of credit needs to go towards him and all the folks over there doing that incredible work. So you saw that in 2018 start to kick off. 2019, fast forward, and that's where when we do all the forensics on the malware, especially Volt Typhoon, that's where it really kind of, kicked off in Guam. Why is that important? Because we've got 3 bases in Guam. If anything were to happen with Taiwan, that's most likely where we would leverage our forces to have some kind of positive response for our partners and allies in the Indo-PACOM. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because you've seen with 4 principal cyber directors testifying before Congress in January that this is a very pervasive threat that has permeated all 16 sectors. And it's more important now than ever for a whole of nation response, because this is an everybody problem. This isn't just a tech problem or a small municipality or a national security issue alone. Yes, it affects economic security and everything else. So we're definitely in a position where we have to reimagine how we approach this.
So, Ali, not to put too fine of a point on it, but we're talking about pre-positioning. There's no espionage value for a lot of these targets.
Correct.
It's fair to say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, if you don't want to say it, I will.
Go ahead.
We've been owned. The reality is,
Right.
is most of our infrastructure has been.
Yes. They have our adversaries, not just China, but there are others out there as well, have found ways at scale to hold us at risk.
Mhm.
And this is potentially moving towards the sabotage stage, which has a different legal connotation to it, but it's an
Absolutely.
important conversation we need to have.
Because the bottom line is, if you can exploit, you can also attack
Absolutely.
if the intent is there. And Elisa, you've identified a lot of including on U.S. critical infrastructure, right, in your report. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts in terms of OT?
Well, we have been working on OT for the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we were doing OT when OT was
Before it
not
was
a
cool.
problem. Before it
Yeah.
was cool. I was
Yeah,
just
yeah,
saying,
yeah.
like, stacks that arrived and
They're
improved.
OG OT.
OT right here, exactly.
So being
Love it, by the way.
breathing, I love it. Breathing OT for the last 10 years. And so I really I will stop talking about it. I'll try to condensate.
Mhm.
Now OT is not only cool, but it's really like an everybody problem. It's in manufacturing, it is in utilities, it is in critical infrastructure that go from healthcare to transportation to telecommunication.
Mhm.
And what we see is also another report we came out with, which is Better Safe Than Sorry,
Mhm.
is about like one common comment I got whenever, like in the last 10 years, I would be saying, like, let's look at OT, is like nobody cares
Takes
about
it
OT.
seriously. Yeah.
And they would be telling me, and OT is air gapped and is not exposed. So another research question was like, let's check
Doesn't
this
sound
out.
like an engineer saying that, but that's
Yeah,
okay. Yeah,
let's check it out.
Yeah,
And we went out there and we looked, and like the amount of devices that have been exposed and that exposed, it just decreased 10% in 7 years.
Wow.
And it's a lot of all kind of critical infrastructure, all kind of system, from building automation, from like pump controls, water treatments, all kind of things are out there exposed.
And a lot of these are really old legacy systems,
Yeah.
right? And they're hard to take down and replace without potentially having an
disruption,
impact.
like
Yeah.
operational impact is quite big, right?
Yeah.
And it's also difficult sometimes to identify. And what is the risk posture? It's just like internet exposure. But what if you pair internet exposure with vulnerabilities that have not been
Exactly.
patched, segmentation not happening? You just said most of those devices are connected to an IT backbone. What if that IT backbone also has another step up to your corporate, right? It doesn't stop there. So the entry point can stop being phishing and web and can start being OT.
And I think we chatted in the past that ransomware as well can be enabled through IoT and OT devices.
Oh yeah, that is
right?
like, actually we have done like another study called the Riot, R for IoT.
Mhm.
And it actually was showing that, like the research question that is like, can a full ransomware attack be started from an IoT devices? And we did with 2 devices as a starting point, an IP camera, I think it was an Axis with like several like vulnerabilities that are exploited. And another one was a NAS, a network attached storage device that, guess what, is an IoT, is very popular, and is being attacked by Chinese sponsored threat actors. Like network device, IP cameras, and NAS are like the top 3 IoT devices that have been most attacked in the past years.
So expect more on that front. Let me ask, and we don't have much time, what do we do? What would you be advising to clients? What would you be advising to governments?
Well,
Both
if we
of
look
you.
at NIST framework, for instance, like it says it clear, right? You need to start with visibility. You need
and
to...
we don't have visibility. I hate to say it, but hopefully y'all can get us further
I
along.
Yeah,
right?
I say that I would really love, actually that is probably another report we could do, which is how many of, our stakeholders have at least visibility. If you take out, visibility and then protection and then detection, monitoring and response, like how many, this is the maturity
Genuinely
level,
have visibility,
like how many really are where? What is the maturity level of government, federal, organization, private?
And I would add firmware is another hidden element that's important in all of this, right? So Alison, anything on what we do?
Well, I think that we need to continue to promote opportunities to do this operation collaboration that you had mentioned. Leverage CISA's role as a national coordinator to be able to really find avenues to connect with some of these small rural municipalities because they are exposed and they are target-rich, resource-poor, as we like to say.
Same risk and not the same
Huge amounts,
resources, right?
Exactly. And so we need to continue to understand that advocacy is a tool, it's not a destination, and that we need to find opportunities to look at solution sets that aren't one-dimensional, as in policy can't get you out of this, regulation can't get you out of this, throwing money at the problem, like we need to find a way to pull all those components together. We do, but it's one of those things where we have to think holistically together.
And to me, that operationalizing in the public-private partnership hinges around trust.
Correct.
And that takes a long time to build.
Yes.
And it can evaporate like
very
that.
fast.
I have to say though that in the terms of collaboration, like we are speaking of collaborative threat intelligence for probably 10 years now. And it's getting some pace in the last few years. Like we joined like several initiatives to actually share contextually enriched threat intelligence, which is also a different step, right? Because if you can say, if we are monitoring, right, like we for Scout as a private sector, we have like sensing in so many critical organizations, and we can see that like certain regions, certain areas are being most attacked by specific threat actors with specific modus operandis and TTPs, that should be part of the shared threat intelligence so that the neighbors can actually, take advantage of that info.
Well said. I'm going to let you both comment on this because having two strong women in this field is great. How do we get more women in the field of cybersecurity?
Oh, well, that's a very, very difficult question in the sense that you need, the pond is very small.
It is. And just look at RSA, love it, but come on.
Yeah, but actually women have these amazing characteristics, also a lot of men, but like women really can adapt, can learn quickly. So maybe let's, give opportunities. Like once, like one of my mentors told me, look at your job description. Is that job description made for women to apply? Women are typically, we only apply if it's 100%, and job description are over. You want to dream, I
have 4 daughters. They worry about things I never thought about.
Exactly. So as a hiring manager, if you are a hiring manager, think about that. So make that job description, read that to your daughter and say, would you apply to this job? And if she say no, rewrite it.
Well said, Allie.
And so I would say that it's a wicked problem, but it's something that we continue to have strong women in leadership positions. You have to see it to believe it. And that in our current positions, we're doing everything we can to promote opportunities in the field to the larger group of often overlooked, underappreciated folks, to include women being half of that. And so back in DC, for folks that are interested, Cyber Guild United Women in Cyber has an event. Men are welcomed, but we really do highlight opportunities for women to continue to grow the field.
Actions speak louder than words. Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for leading the way, and thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.